Hello, and welcome to Solid Professor Core Concepts. In this course, we'll be focusing on the fundamentals of using SolidWorks, including parts, assemblies, and drawings. Before we get started, I'd like to point out that we at Solid Professor use what's called a concept-based approach to instruction, meaning rather than teaching you how to build specific models, I'll teach you how to use features and functions in such a way that you can apply them to any model. When you get to the parts section, I'll show you how to combine the skill learned in the Sketcher and Feature sections and apply them to build actual parts. So what is SolidWorks? Well, this may seem like an obvious question. It's a CAD tool, right? Besides being a very user-friendly CAD tool, I'd like to tell you a little more about how it behaves before jumping right in. SolidWorks is a parametric, feature-based system that allows you to create 3D parts, assemblies, and 2D drawings. A parametric modeler behaves differently than other more primitive CAD tools that are object-driven. What I mean is, in a parametric modeler, everything is controlled by either parameters, dimensions, or relationships. For example, if you want to move the position of a hole that's in a block, in a parametric system, you would change the dimension or relation that controls its position. The parameters and relationships you set up allow you to have control as a designer over something called design intent. The term design intent basically describes the way your design will behave depending on the way you design it. By using parameters and relationships, this gives you ultimate control over the model. Here in this example, I'd like to center this circle within the rectangle. I know the rectangle is 4 inches by 6 inches. One way to center the circle is to dimension it 2 inches from one edge. And 3 inches from the other edge. That centers the circle on this rectangle. But does this capture my design intent? Well, let's see what happens when I change the size of the rectangle to 7 inches by 8 inches. As you can see, the circle is no longer centered, so no, this doesn't capture my design intent. So how can I center this hole so that no matter what size the rectangle is, the circle will always be centered? In a parametric modeler, it's also possible to use relationships. Let's get rid of these dimensions. To create a relationship that centers the circle, I'll sketch a diagonal line using the centerline tool. Next, I'll add a midpoint relation between the diagonal line and the center of the circle. Now, no matter what the size of the rectangle, the circle will always be centered. This is just one example of the countless ways to capture your design intent when modeling in 3D, and we'll talk much more about design intent and these geometric relationships throughout the course. You can see how modeling in a parametric environment can be very powerful. The other huge advantage of this type of system is that you also get associativity between your parts, assemblies, and drawings, meaning if you make a change to the design of a part, the change will take effect in any assemblies that it's a part of. And its 2D drawing will update automatically as well. You can also make the same design change from the 2D drawing, and the part will update, as well as the assembly. This associative behavior saves you lots of time when you make design changes, so that you only have to make the change once, and all associated items will automatically update appropriately. Before we get started learning the fundamentals of creating parts, assemblies, and drawings, I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce some important areas of the SolidWorks interface that you will be interacting with during the remainder of this course. I'll begin by pressing the New icon. A window will appear asking whether you would like to create a part, assembly, or drawing. These are the 3 main types of files you'll be working with in SolidWorks. If this window doesn't look like the one displayed on your screen, notice the Advanced button here at the bottom. The Advanced section gives you access to additional templates and is where you can access templates that you can customize, something we'll talk about in another lesson. For this course, I'll be using the Novice window. I'll select Part. And when I click OK, SolidWorks opens a blank part document. On the right is the Graphics area, the working space where you graphically interact with your parts, assemblies, or drawings. This area on the left is called the Feature Manager Design Tree. The feature tree will display commands and information for parts assemblies or drawings, and also for different functions in each. Basically, this tree is a method to interact with the items, such as sketches and features displayed in the graphics area. Don't worry about exactly what this means right now. We will go into much greater detail of how to use both of these areas throughout the course. Next, focus your attention to this row of icons above the graphics area. These icons constitute the Command Manager. The Command Manager is simply an ingenious way of organizing the commands that are required to operate SolidWorks without taking up too much screen space. Notice the tabs at the bottom of the Command Manager. Each tab of the Command Manager contains tools specific for different functions in SolidWorks. The Command Manager will automatically change to display a different set of tools depending on whether you are creating a part, assembly, or a drawing, or you can simply click the tabs at the bottom to bring up a particular set of commands. I can click on the Sketch tab to see the Sketch tools, and on the Feature tab to see the Feature tools. Don't worry too much about what Feature tools and Sketch tools are for right now. We'll cover them in detail later in the course. Now, not all of the tools in SolidWorks are displayed in the Command Manager. This is by design to keep the interface simple and user-friendly. You can find all of the commands, functions, and features that SolidWorks has to offer in the drop-down menus. As with most Windows-based applications, the drop-down menus are located at the top of the interface. To reveal them, just hover the SolidWorks logo in the upper left or press the Alt key. If I press the Push Pin icon, the drop-down menus will stay pinned on the screen, even when I move the cursor away. One final note on the Command Manager. By default, it displays the icons with a text description. To turn off the text descriptions, right-click on top of the Command Manager and uncheck Use Large Buttons with Text. For the duration of this instruction, the text will be turned off on all icons to allow for easier display of all the commands available. In the upper right-hand corner of the SolidWorks interface is the Search inbox, which you can use to find your SolidWorks files, or search the Help file, community forums, or knowledge base. The Search window also allows you to find and run a command simply by typing the name here. So if you're having trouble finding a particular feature or command in the drop-down list, you can simply search for it here under Commands and access it right away. Here's another quick tip for launching commands. If you press the S key, a shortcut menu will appear and you can launch the command from here. When you press the S key, it also automatically activates the command search in the search bar, so you can type in a command and find it that way too. Also notice the Show Me Glasses icon here next to the command. When I click this icon, SolidWorks will point out the command in the user interface with a big red arrow and move the cursor to hover over the command's icon. If the command does not already appear on a toolbar, you can add it simply by dragging and dropping the command from the results list to the toolbar. One last thing I'd like to show you in this lesson are a couple of SolidWorks options you should be aware of. To access SolidWorks options, I can simply press the Options icon. SolidWorks options break down into two categories. System options control all of the global settings in SolidWorks. The document properties, on the other hand, only affect the part, assembly, or drawing you're working with. Here I can change the drafting standards and units for the part. I'll hit OK to accept the changes. When I return to the part, notice in the bottom right-hand corner of this interface, you can see the unit system I just set for the part. I can click the arrow to toggle between the different default unit systems, or I can click Edit Document Units to bring up the same unit option window that we just saw a moment ago. One more area I'd like to quickly point out that has some additional resources is this area here on the side of your screen that appears every time you launch SolidWorks. It's called the Task Pane. The Task Pane is simply a flyout window that can be expanded when using SolidWorks. If the Task Pane is not visible, you may have to enable it by going to the View drop-down menu and select Task Pane. To expand it, simply click on one of the items stored in the Task Pane. To hide it again, click anywhere outside the window. You can also detach the Task Pane from the side of the SolidWorks window by opening any of the tabs and drag the title bar at the top. You can place the task pane anywhere on your screen, but it can only be docked on the right side of the graphics area. The task pane is divided into several different tabs. I'll click on the Solid Professor tab. Here I can access the latest tips and tricks and find out about Solid Professor announcements. But more importantly, this tab provides you with a fast and an easy way to access Solid Professor course lessons right from within SolidWorks. You also have SolidWorks community and online resources available. I highly recommend spending some time with the resources in this section to become more knowledgeable and more involved with the active SolidWorks community. The SolidWorks Resources section of the task pane offers you quick access to functions also found in the File drop-down menu, such as starting a new document or opening an existing document, and also useful items generally found in the Help menu, such as Online Tutorial and the What's New guide. The next tab down is the Design Library. It allows me to save frequently used components or features, such as hardware or sheet metal cutouts. I also want to point out this icon here called 3D Content Central. This is where you can share as well as view SolidWorks models with other users worldwide. The File Explorer allows me to look through my documents that are either open in SolidWorks or that can be found on my computer's hard drive or network location. The View Palette tab is used to drag views onto a drawing sheet, a topic that's covered in greater detail in the drawings portion of the course. The Appearance Scenes tab lets you drag and drop different appearances and scenes to a part or assembly, and we'll talk about it in detail later in the course. And finally, the Custom Properties tab allows you to edit the custom properties of a part, assembly, or drawing, which we'll also go into later.